Welcome everyone, this is Coaching in Session. My name is Michael Rearden and I will be your mindset coach today. And today we're going to be talking about obesity, weight, and what you need to do about it. Because if you are like me, you probably know a little bit about the body, how it works, weight gain, macros and micros, and how much calories you need per day, MyFitnessPal app. You might know all of those things, right? But what if I told you that there's research that not many people are going to be keen on? We can begin to learn a little bit more about what is a possible situation. Because if you think about it, we know just the surface level stuff of fitness and of eating healthy, but yet we live in a world where, 70% of people are overweight? This right here, or maybe 70% in America at least. This right here is a sign that something is going on. Now, I understand it doesn't help having a fast food spot on every corner. Just because it's on every corner doesn't necessarily mean we have to pull in at every corner to go pick up a hamburger or some french fries. What's going on in our mind and what's going on in our history that is giving us this extra weight or these extra pounds? Because I'm sure you might be tired of looking in the mirror and saying, poor me, boo-hoo, I gotta lose weight. I gotta lose 50 pounds, or I gotta fit in this dress, or I gotta get my six-pack abs back, right? I mean, we can all do this every single day, but we don't take action, right? So if we're not taking action, if we are gaining the weight, typically unknowingly, we just do it unconsciously. So that means something is going on in our body, in our mind, and in our life that we have to begin to give some attention to. And today we're going to be doing just that with my guest, Jason Stanley. Welcome, Jason Stanley, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Just a great day here.
Today we're going to be talking about your work. You specialize in helping people heal the root cause of weight gain. In just a moment, we're going to be getting into that. Weight gain has been a huge issue, especially here in America. I know you're not currently on US soil, but you probably are well aware of the epidemic of obesity here. We have a fast food chain on every corner. Many people don't want to exercise or just be fit in general. They have poor habits, to say the least. We're going to be talking about your work in all of the, studies and findings that you have found to help heal the root cause of weight gain. So with that being said, take it over.
All righty. Well, first of all, Michael, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be here and tell your listeners a little bit about my research. Let me start off with a fundamental thing, and that is we must individually have a paradigm shift on weight gain and weight loss. And I'll start with that on the paradigm shift is it is not your fault when I'm speaking to the overweight person when I say that. Now, my research has been primarily in the obese. So that's somebody who is at least 30% above their normal weight and suffers with it usually long term. So I'm not very good at telling you how to lose weight, the 10, 20 pounds to get into that dress so you look great for the wedding, into your slim jeans for the summer. Now, it's not your fault. And why can I say that? Well, we've spent billions of dollars and literally millions of people have lost weight. Problem is that they always regain it. 97% of the people who lose weight gain it back within 18 months and more. And now that's worse than cocaine addiction. And so we dig into this and look at the why. And I'm not going to go into the science of it, but I do have to say that we have three areas in our brain. One of them is the thinking brain, one is the emotional brain, and one is the reptilian brain. That's way, way down to the base. In that, the emotional brain has no language, but it responds to what it perceives as danger and safety. I know it sounds pretty far-fetched for overweight issues, but what happens is the patterning in the brain is set up during childhood that when I'm loved, when I'm accepted, when I'm safe, I am eating. It doesn't matter what the food is, just the act of eating, my family accepts me. Now, it can be all the way up to joy and love, but the acceptance is the bottom line. And that gets patterned. And then as an adult, any stress. It can be internal stress, like, oh my God, I've gained 3 pounds, or it can be external stress, my boss is giving me a hard time. And that stress is perceived by that emotional brain as danger. So you have to go to where it's safe. Now remember, this doesn't have any language. It's only perceived as danger. And so the response, because of the patterning in childhood, is I must eat to meet that need. And it's not a desire, it's not a want, it's a need. I must go there to relieve this danger as perceived in my brain. A way to kind of look at that so it makes sense is think of PTSD. Now that's an adult issue and it's out of trauma. And I'm not saying that the child was traumatized, although that's frequent, but it's absolutely not necessary. But a PTSD person who's suffering from that can have it for 50 years. We look at the Vietnam veterans who are still living in a cardboard box. So when they get triggered, they do something stupid, like climb to the top of the house up there with their guns because they're afraid that the enemy's coming, and they'll be on their way up the roof and they'll say, this is stupid, this is stupid, this is stupid, but they cannot overcome the compulsion to run to safety. And that's literally what's going on in the brain. And now let's really dig into it for a second, because you focus so much on mindset, which is great. I love that book, Mindset. I love the idea that you have the mindset of growth or limit. It's huge. So what you're talking about generally is amazing, but this is a different part of the brain, and it's not about the mind. It's not about what you're thinking. It's not about that. It's about how the brain at a very core level functions, and it creates this need to eat. And depending on how strong the compulsion is, relates to how large the person is. Am I making sense so far?
Makes sense. So, like, one of the questions I want to ask is, we have the need that was when we're younger, we feel safe eating. But is there going to be, I guess you can say, any weight in the matter, no pun intended, about body types? Like, I don't know all the body types. Like, that's not my expertise. I'm like a mesomorph, and like anamorph or exomorph or something along those lines. Does that play a role in if someone's going to be obese?
No, not at all. None whatsoever. Going along with that, we could say, well, what about metabolism? Looking at body type and metabolism, they're different things, of course, but they're kind of similar. And there's a big argument in the weight loss world and the industry that says, well, it's a calorie is a calorie is a calorie, or no, it's calorie versus outtake is nonsense. But here's the bottom line. Regardless of your metabolism and or your body type, you have to overeat for your body in the state it is in right now to gain weight or to continually gain weight. Now, yeah, sure, if you're one of those tall, lanky people with a really high fidgety kind of activity, you burn off a lot more calories, but you can still become obese. You can simply overeat for your body in the condition that it's in. And that condition includes your hormones and all those other things. Before we go any further, though, I do want to say one thing, and that is I've been doing clinical research on this for the last 2 years. I began in this back in 1980, and I've run multiple clinical trials that have failed. But the one I'm working on right now, we have found a way to repattern that deep brain, and we have the cure. But I'm glad to answer any of the other questions that you have. I just want to get that out there before I forgot to say it.
No, this is all good. Like, it's a conversation because when we're trying to figure out like what is the root cause to weight gain, and we realize it's our innate nature to just overeat, where does that habit come from? Does it come from being allowed to just eat until there's no more food in the fridge or in the pantry? Or is it a way like people have learned, or is it a way that people now use as a coping mechanism?
Those are really good questions in that it's kind of where most people who are not deeply educated in this would say, yeah, that makes sense. But actually, no. The coping mechanism, yes, at the very deep level, but in the conscious mind, no, not at all. And back to your first part of your question there, is it about that you were allowed to eat until done? Well, that is a supposition that we will overeat naturally. We won't. Actually, you have mechanisms in your body, what I call a natural eater, the average person who's not overweight. We will do things where they'll eat socially and they'll overeat. Eat popcorn in the movies, that's a social thing. Overeat on Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner. That's again a social thing. But what they do is they listen to their body. Now, it's not like they're consciously thinking, oh, I'm listening to my body. No, they just go along with it. And it's like when you're tired, you just kind of fall asleep. Well, if you watch somebody who has overeaten, say a family member that you're close to, and they've overeaten on Christmas evening or Thanksgiving, and they're typically normally a normal weight person, if you watch them the next day, they push away the sandwich or they push away half of the breakfast. They only eat half of their lunch. And you say, well, what? Wasn't that sandwich good or didn't you like your breakfast? I'm just full. And they push away. And that's what normal eaters do. Now, you're a guy who's really fit. And if you go to the gym and you work out, your metabolism boosts for that few hours and you'll eat more. But if you thin down, you just say, okay, I'm going to go inactive for whatever reason. I'm really busy with my business. And you lose a lot of that muscle. Well, in that case, your metabolism will slow down and you'll go, oh, I'm just not hungry. And you'll eat less naturally. So the person who's the overeater is not overeating because they're hungry and they're not overeating just out of habit. Of course, habits do play a part, especially if you've been doing it for 30 years. Let's say you've got somebody who's 50 years old and they became obese in their early 20s or late teens. Well, they've got a lot of habits built up around it. So it's not just a simple single thing. But yeah, it's back to that motivation that was created, not because they were allowed to clean the pantry, but because when they ate, they were accepted. Let me give an example. In America, we have a large Hispanic population. One of the people, one of my clients, was a middle-aged Mexican woman, and she talked about her childhood. As a kid, her parents were first-generation immigrants. She was first-generation born. So she's native speaker, didn't have any trouble at school, all of those things. She was just a kid in school. You're popular, you're not popular, all the things that kids have to deal with. Come home, there were chores, homework, etc. Then came dinner time. In her family, there were 7 children. Mom and dad were blue-collar workers. They were salt of the earth, good people. Family was happy. And at dinner time, she said it was a chaotic joy. That's what her words. And said she and her brother, she was right in the middle of all those large kids. And the oldest brother, who's a teenager working, the youngest child, I remember what it was, is still in the bassinet. And it was a free-for-all. The kids are joking and poking each other and stealing burritos off of each other's plates. It was just this fun time that happened every day. Now, after dinner, she would have to either do the chores or, which would be like help mom do the dishes if it was her turn, or cooking for the next day. And if not, then they all cleared the table and she went and did her homework. So again, not a bad life, a normal childhood situation, but that day after day after day, she could rely on this just being enveloped in love and joy while she was eating. And that makes that connection. It's a developmental process that's part of the brain. And it works great if the compulsion is for something that helps the species stay alive. Let's say back in the hunter-gatherer days, you would have young boys who always got praise for any time they used their bow and arrow and shot a mouse. The mice would come in and mess up with the food for the winter stores. Well, that basically was in that era for hundreds of thousands of generations. Being a good hunter, compulsive hunter, meant that you were going to bring home food for the family. Very successful strategy. So the brain holds on to it. But today, we don't have to go hunt for food. We, on the other hand, build whatever the compulsions are. And you can look at this in another way, back to kind of the mindset thing, is we know that owners of businesses, medium businesses, guys and gals in the C-suites, the CEO, et cetera, the high-end managers, they are disproportionately the firstborn. Whereas artists, people who are actors and writers and painters, the arts are disproportionately represented by the youngest. And we look at what happens with the oldest. We say, oh, as a child growing up, you're helping mom manage the kids, get them all together to go to church. And the youngest is getting their diaper changed. They don't have that responsibility. So the oldest winds up being the driven to be responsible. The youngest is driven to be expressive. So we can kind of look at birth order, something that we all see around us, to see how this mechanism works.
I want to get into culture. I know you touched on it a little bit, but here in America, as you said, like you had your client who was first generation native speaker and everything. Now we have a culture coming in, right? Like the American view for breakfast. I don't know if you ever saw like a picture of like how other countries make fun of us for breakfast. We have toast, eggs, and bacon, and a lot of bacon. It's not just 2 strips. It's like 50 strips of bacon on the plate, and then we have like a cup of coffee. So that's what other countries think we eat for breakfast. And then for lunch, we typically have like hamburgers and hot dogs. That's American. Like if you ever ask like what's American food, people will say hamburgers and hot dogs. And then for dinner, it's whatever. It could be pot roast, mac and cheese. We have typically 3 hearty meals a day. Maybe like, looking back at the hunter-gatherer type of lifestyle, they might not have had those 3 meals a day. They might have had something light before the hunt, and then they might not eat until they got back. For them, it was a very active lifestyle. They sure their bodies adjusted accordingly. But our bodies are probably everywhere right now, where it's like, okay, in the morning we're eating all this food, at night we're eating all this food. Sometimes we're active, sometimes we're not active at all. And especially like with our technology today, we don't have to be active. Does that play a role in causing more weight gain for people?
You would think so, but actually, no, it doesn't. It goes back to that thing that I said earlier about metabolism. The hunter-gatherer, the person who went out and hunted, they were running and doing all the things they were doing. They were burning calories, of course. But let's put that in perspective. You and I are sitting in our chairs right now having this conversation. So we're burning X number of calories based on our personal metabolism. Let's get up and get outside and run for 1 mile. Whatever speed you run at, you're going to outrun me. I'm the guy you went behind you when the bear is chasing us, right? All you got to do is outrun me. Okay, now, but on average, running that mile is only going to burn an extra 100 calories. That's a slice of bread or a little over an Oreo cookie. Oreo cookie's 80 calories. So it may take you 15 minutes to run that mile, depending on the condition you're in. And it takes you about 15 seconds to eat the Oreo cookie. So the lifestyle is not the dictator. It's the drive to overeat beyond what your body is asking for nutritionally. And on the diet, just real quickly, I hate to say this, but it doesn't matter. Diet matters hugely for your health. It's like exercise and sleep. They matter hugely for your health. But you can do this yourself, and I'm sure your listeners can have noticed this. You go to Whole Foods or a vegetarian restaurant and just look around, and you'll see the same percentage of people in America is 70% overweight, 40% are obese, that you'll find at Walmart groceries and at Denny's or at McDonald's. It's the same percentage. So diet is not the driver. Does diet count? Of course it does. Obviously, 100 calories of chocolate cake hits your body very different than 100 calories of steak or salad.
We have to look at, well, if we know that it is going to be a proponent of us overeating, we developed it when we were young, or just as we developed in life, maybe predominantly when we were younger, what would be, I guess, I don't want to say the cure for it, but what would be the steps that someone can take to lose that weight?
Okay, this is where the paradigm shift comes in. Losing the weight is the second thing we have to do. I'm going to run the danger of sounding really geeky here. In the brain, not the mind, not what you're thinking, but in the physical brain, the physical neural structure in there, there's a thing that the scientists call permanently potentiated pathways. That's the patterning that I'm talking about. And when that happens through development, then there's things in the physical part that gets locked in. And you have to go through a technique that will change the chemistry of that neural pathway. It deconstructs it. So once that is changed, that pathway is deconstructed, that pattern that's in the emotional brain has been broken. Broken is maybe a bad term. It's been resolved. Resolved is really what you're doing. You're resolving it back to its natural neutral state. Right now you have thoughts going zip, zip, zip in your brain, and it's in a neutral state. So those thoughts can run down a pathway, and then the next thought, and the next thought, and the next thought, which has no connection to one another because it's a neutral pathway. It's like you can pick up anything with your hand and your arm, whatever you grab a hold of, you can pick it up. So it's a neutral instrument to pick things up. And so you have to resolve that pathway back to neutral so that the compulsion is no longer there. So you feel stressed, you don't go down that pathway to eating to resolve the stress. And there's a technology, a therapy that we could do to do that.
What's the name of the therapy?
It's called havening, like a safe haven. And for the scientists in the group, it's the depotentiated pathway. That's what it's about. And interestingly enough, it's very, very simple to do. It's complex in the process, but the actual doing of havening is very simple. You have on your body multiple spots where the skin has different kinds of sensors and receptors, nerve endings in it. So if we look at our hand, the palm of our hand has one kind of skin, the back of our hand has a different kind of skin. Hair follicles being the kind of obvious thing that makes it easy to see. Now, if we stimulate these parts of our body, across the forehead, across the upper planes of the cheeks, palm of the hand, and the outside of the arm, that creates a delta wave in the brain. I know this is pretty geeky stuff, so I apologize. But with the delta wave in the brain, if that pathway is activated, you have to activate the pathway, you have to be thinking about the food and what have you, or in the case of PTSD, the trauma. And then so that active pathway is going, it's got energy shooting down through it. And then you do this havening process. And what that does is it brings delta wave into the brain. Delta is a normal state in the brain. We go through it every night as we sleep. Right now, you and I are in beta, most likely. If you go into meditation, you go into alpha. As you're going to sleep, it's theta. And then all the deepest one is in delta. You introduce the delta wave and it changes the molecule structure and releases that pathway. It resolves what was locked in, and it allows that pathway, that neural pathway, to become neutral again. So that's havening is the tool that I'm using. Yes.
How long does that last for? Like, if you think of like, let's say if you put something into your body like food, right? Food digests, right? There's a natural process for digestion. And eventually the food is going to be absorbed through your body, and anything that is not needed or can't be absorbed is going to be expelled. The process that we're talking about today, is it something that's going to stick with you, like even after the device is off or the therapy is complete? Or is it something that has like a reoccurring effect even after it's done?
That's such a cool question. Nobody's ever asked that, so thanks. It's permanent. Let me go back to my veteran, the Vietnam War veteran. He got PTSD from whatever he experienced, and it's the same exact mechanism in the brain. We've got guys who have been living in cardboard boxes for 50 years. That's permanent. Now, once that pathway is deactivated, then it's gone forever. So in the case of this situation, which is developmentally, the pathway is potentiated, the pattern is created developmentally. Well, once we turn that pattern back to neutral, then it's neutral for the rest of your life. And, if you think of it this way, you go through developmental process once. That's from the age of, 1 or 2 up to around 12. The brain is finished building around age 12. And then if you change anything at a fundamental level, it will not develop again unless circumstances such as fear or what have you. And that's where you get into PTSD. You're never going to redevelop this connection between stress and eating. That cannot be redeveloped. That's a childhood developmental process.
Last question. Think of it like it won't happen again, or like once it's done, like it's blocked off. Think of it as more of, I know this is not necessarily the best example, but it's the example I'm going to use. If someone's an alcoholic and they, close off that path, they do have, I guess, a choice. I think it's more of a choice at this point to create a new path for themselves, that it wasn't the old path of being alcoholic, but it's a new path of going back to that alcoholism. Is that something that happens or could happen, or is it like one and done?
It's one and done. And you bring up a real good point with the alcoholism, because alcoholism is an addiction, and addictions are multiple faceted. They come from an emotional base. The alcoholic doesn't say, hey, I'm going to pour a bourbon or a scotch because I'm thirsty. It's for the relief and all of that. So that's one piece, the emotional charge to numb, etc. But it also happens with any addiction, chasing likes on your social media, is there's a dopamine hit. So you do this behavior, whether it's drink the drink or do the behavior, in the hypothalamus, which is a different part of the brain. I've been working in the amygdala. I haven't used that term, but that's a different part of the brain. And so the hypothalamus gives you a dopamine hit. That gives you that little bit of a rush that you're really a good person. You're really okay. Now, with alcoholism and other addictions, that pathway has been wired pretty good. And if you ever go back, and in AA, they say one drink is too many, a million is not enough. So it's that one drink again, which re-excites that prior addiction. So it's not really going back to, or excuse me, it's not really creating a new path. It's actually going back down the old path. Now, I don't know enough about addictions to say whether the techniques that I use would completely resolve that. I just don't know the brain well enough in that arena. But we're talking about kind of two different things, a pickup and a Porsche, both transportation, but they do different things.
No, I just wanted to ask that question because it was something that popped into my mind, where if this type of therapy could stop patterns, could it stop also addictive patterns? But as you said, there is a difference between the two. And our conversation today was definitely one that was new to me because I'm very familiar with the way of losing weight, the old-fashioned way, I guess, get on a treadmill and stop eating.
Yeah.
As you can see, with research and with development, we can learn so much more about the body. And I do want to thank you for bringing that wisdom and that insight because it gives a different perspective to mindset into the mind of how deep things actually go. If you think of like therapists, they go all the way back to childhood and they look at the root causes. So it just makes sense. And it was something that I might have thought passively, but I never really thought intently. I thank you for bringing that to my attention. As we begin to wrap up, I would love to get some final words and for you to tell the audience where they can find you.
Well, unfortunately, Michael, they can't right
Well,
now.
they're
I'm
going to
just here
find you. I'm
trying
going to make sure they find you.
to. Well, I don't have my website is being built. I'm coming to you I've been in the research long enough to really understand it and just starting to tell the world about it. It's not going to be publicly available for a few months yet.
Okay. Well, once it is ready, I will toss all those links in the description box below. The only thing you have to do for me, Jason, is just say, hey, the links are ready. I'm going to toss it there. So I encourage everyone to check back in the show notes to be updated about the current whereabouts of your website. And then we're going to make sure that they learn how to heal the root cause of weight gain and stop doing a band-aid approach of maybe dieting or just going to the gym for hours at end. Do something that's going to have a more meaningful impact. Thank you so much, Jason, for coming on and talking about your research. All right, everyone, I'd like to thank you so much for watching that interview of my guest, Jason Stanley. The research that he has been doing and has learned about has given us a new idea and a new concept to look at. Well, what is weight gain? Why are people overweight? We can look at certain science figure things like, okay, well, the reason why someone gains weight again after losing weight is because their fat cells have not shrunk, and then so they still remain the same, and then they start to eat, and then the fat cells just kind of go, oh, look, food, I'm going to go store this, and yeah, right? There's just so much research and so much study, and there's just so much science behind the whole health and fitness world. And it's not only about get your gym membership, do your Pilates, run a lot. And I love the idea that, it's easy to eat a piece of toast or a piece of bread. It's 100 calories for that one slice, but you have to spend an hour on the treadmill. Even if we were conscious with our eating, right? If you had to choose, like your favorite might be like a brownie or maybe ice cream. And I mean, you get like a medium ice cream, right? That's like 1,200 calories, for some types of ice cream. But you're looking at least a minimum 1,000 calories for this little pint of Ben and Jerry's. And you're like, Jesus, I ate the whole thing. What happened? And your maintenance calories are 1,500 or your maintenance calories are 2,200. You literally ate almost half or over half of your maintenance calories. What do we do about it? We live in a society where Ben and Jerry's is the norm, right? It's delicious. It tastes good. It makes me feel good. But it doesn't necessarily bring good to the body. What we have to start to do with the epidemic of obesity is we have to look at our roots. We have to look at the root cause more so than, okay, the reason I'm gaining all this weight is because I'm eating all this ice cream. Well, okay, great job figuring that out. Anyone could have told you that if you eat too much, you're going to gain some weight. But why are we eating too much? What is that habit that you have created for yourself? Because when you're young, and I remember even telling my wife this when the baby was still, an infant and he was breastfeeding, she was so worried about, hey, is the baby going to overeat? I don't want the baby to overeat and things like that, right? Now you can, take a bottle and like put it in the baby's mouth. And then of course the bottle is going to keep, having milk go in the baby's mouth. The baby's going to keep on drinking and then eventually throw it all up. But for breastfeeding, it's a little bit different. The baby will stop sucking when the baby doesn't want any more milk. It's like, okay, I'm good. I'm done. I don't need any more. Eventually, we grow and we learn. Now we're like, oh, look, dessert. We literally just ate a whole meal, but we have room for dessert. Think of Thanksgiving. I know I am a culprit to this too. I have gotten better from my high school and my in my 20s. When I was young, I would eat until, I was going to explode, right? It does not feel good. Now I eat more to like 80% full because that's what works best for me now. So now I'm trying to figure out, well, on Thanksgiving, why do we have to eat so much food? We eat all this food and then it tastes really good, right? We're around family. We're around family, huh? Okay, so being around family means we have to eat. We have to eat at dinner together. We eat our meal, right? We're talking. We're going to be in that social aspect, as Jason was saying. We can get distracted from looking at, are we full or not? If we give some more attention to what we're eating, to what we're doing, something's going to happen. We're going to start to be able to readily give ourselves more of a mindset of, I'm full, I'm good, I don't need more. For the people who are, having a hard time with this idea of, well, I don't want to be accountable for that. Well, if you want to make changes for yourself, you would probably want to begin there. No one has to restrict your diet or your planning. You get to choose that for yourself. If you want to make a change, begin at the root cause. Don't just cover up everything with a Band-Aid or a quick fix. If you need help, the links are going to be in the description box below. For any help here at Reven Concepts, we are here. Just drop us a line on our website, revenconcepts.com, and we'll be more than happy to assist you in your journey to a better body or a better mind. My name is Michael Rearden. I'm a mindset coach. If you have any questions, email me, coachinginsession@gmail.com, and I'll see everyone on the next episode of Coaching in Session. Until then, everyone take care.